So thank you again for joining me today. I am Lucy and I plan Italian weddings. I've been doing this for the past 8 years now under my wedding planning brand, Whisker and White. After I had my own Italian wedding back 10 years ago, I'm really old. I had a wedding 10 years ago in Tuscany, and it still remains literally one of the best experiences of my life. We had 120 people come over to Italy. We had a very low budget for our I just muted myself, and it was incredible. And I have all my passion comes from wanting that for other people. I just know that it's just such an incredible thing to experience, and I want to make that accessible for anyone, no matter what your budget or what you want to achieve with your Italian wedding. And when I became a wedding planner, I was mentored by my partner and co-founder of Lista, Danielle, and she's got over 30 years experience of planning Italian weddings. So she's taught me everything I've learned so far, but believe me, there is so much to learn. There is so much I don't know and that I still need to learn, and I do every single day, running La Lista and doing Whisker and White as well. So at the time when I planned my Italian wedding, I worked in marketing and budgets were really something I enjoyed. So this topic particularly, I am passionate about because I really enjoy spreadsheets, but I also think it's absolutely fundamental and integral to you having a good planning experience. Even with the kind of highest budget weddings, £500,000, £1 million, you still have to have a budget at the start because you really need to understand where your money is going to go and if you can achieve what you want to achieve. Otherwise, through planning, you will learn that the things that you aspire to perhaps cost more than you thought and you won't be able to have them. And that's just going to be a really disappointing experience. It's really good to get it all clear from the start so that as you go through, planning is calm and enjoyable, which is what we hope for you throughout. So as I say, I'm going to go through budgets. So it's going to be dry. It's not going to be the most exciting thing you've ever heard, but hopefully you will come away with just loads of information to help you go ahead and either get your own budget in line and looking quite accurate, or set one up if you haven't got one already. And at the end, I'm just going to share a couple of products that we have at La Lista that could help you further with your planning. One of them will be my membership, or I'm going to give you a code if you'd like to join that as well. So just a heads up on that. So I'm going to open up my budget download just to show you what this is. So this is the budget that is available for free on La Lista. It is having a facelift because we are having a little rebrand this week of the whole La Lista website and everything. So this budget is here to try and help you go through every single aspect that you might have within your wedding and plot it out. So we're going to come back to that in a little bit. So if you want to, you can download that for free. You might already have it. And then I'm just going to show you, 1 second, the 4 steps to planning that I have come up with for you. So I think there's a process to this, and I've thought through for this session how I do it with my clients and what I've watched them do hundreds of times over the years and how it's worked for them to get the budget to the best possible place. So these 4 steps are: when you're first in your planning mode, get together with your fiance and really think about the scenarios that you want to have for your wedding. So kind of brainstorm your ideal wedding and what that would look like and set your priorities together. So when I first talk to couples, often they are largely in agreement with this, but sometimes they have different priorities. So I think it's just so important from the start to understand each other's top things, and be able to then, as you move forward, align and think, kind of assign certain budget amounts to your individual priorities, and hopefully lots of those priorities will align and that will make your planning go a lot smoother. I know it's a really obvious thing to say, to have this conversation, but I don't know if it always happens fully. So as I say, these first calls I have with couples, I ask a lot of questions and it often becomes apparent that these things haven't always been thought through. So just having a nice meal or a nice drink and going through this together would just be a really nice thing to do. And obviously at this point, you could think about your guest number, which has a huge impact on your budget. And you could think about how you're going to get the funds for your wedding, just to be really frank, what that pot of budget might look like and where it comes from. Some people have savings, some people make savings plans, other people have kind of amounts given to them by friends or family members. So kind of getting your priorities straight, getting your guest list together and thinking about how that money is going to come together for you is step one. Step two is to actually draft a budget. So that budget that I just showed you has some numbers in it, and it gives a range of low and high costs for things. It's quite challenging. There's a lot of detail behind those numbers, but I think you could go in there and with those numbers that are there, plot them in as a very, very early forecast for your wedding. And then you will soon see what that budget comes to. And even though it's not going to be accurate, it's going to give you such a good idea of the total cost of your wedding. So, you know, if you do it roughly, but you come out 20 grand over budget, then you're really going to have to think about something, whether that's changing the venue price or the style of the venue, inviting less guests, which is something that doesn't get talked about much. I don't really like that idea. I want you to have everyone that you want to come to your wedding, but it is a lever that you can use to change your budget or cut out some of the things that you'd put in there that were kind of aspirational that you might need to rethink. So hopefully you get to a point where your budget roundabout works for the amount that you're aiming for. Step three would be to then get some real prices. So reach out to some of the vendors that you've seen and liked. So you might have been stalking a photographer that you love, just find out their pricing guide, plop that into your budget and see if that actually relates. And again, whether you need to adjust any priorities. Do that for a few things like venues, catering, photographer, anything that's a priority for you or anything that is perhaps kind of a big chunk of the budget. So those bigger things I've just mentioned, they usually take up the kind of biggest chunks of the budget. So getting those accurate and clear would be a good idea. And then step four is to finally realign your budget and lock it in. So once you've got those real costs, put them into your budget and see what that does. It might make it higher, it might make it lower, who knows? And then again, reframe what you're going to be able to achieve. And the goal, as I said, is so that you have a really good understanding from the start of what you're going to be able to do, so that as you go through planning, you're not going to come up against ultimately disappointment, that you've got all these things that you want to do that you can't, or that you can't have the quality or level of supplier that you thought you could. So you might have put 3 grand in for photographer, but actually the one you want is 6 grand. That's going to be very disappointing. So knowing that as part of step 3 is really helpful and helps you holistically look at the budget rather than going through moment by moment. So usually you book planner, venue, catering, photographer. If you go through in that order and you haven't done this budget, you may overcommit earlier on, and that may cause you problems further along in the budget. And as you go through that list of things you book, ultimately the things that kind of come a bit later are your other events around your wedding or your decorations. And it's really sad when you get to that and you realize your decor budget is tiny and you can't do half the things that you thought you could, because you've overcommitted earlier on. Obviously, if you decided to do that earlier on, that's different. But when you come to things and you can't do them, I've seen it and it makes me sad. So I don't want that for you. So they're my 4 steps. I am just gonna share and see if there's any questions below. No, we're doing well. Got a couple of late joiners. I'm just gonna let in. Okay, now we're going to get the budget open and go through it line by line. So we've got a question. Someone told you that there's time limitations. Is that true? Do you mean music restrictions? I think you probably do.
Yeah. Yes, so like in the evening, for example, that you have to cut off your music or whatever by 1 a.m. or something like that.
Yeah, that is definitely true. And every venue is different. So like with almost every variable when you're booking a venue, everything is different. So a lot of venues say at 12 o'clock you have to go inside, but there are also lots of venues that you can stay outside dancing until 2 or 3 a.m. So you've got to make sure that's on your criteria list when you're kind of interviewing and looking at venues. We have another download, which is currently called the venue tick list, but by Friday, it's going to be the venue guide. And that's got all the questions that we ask as planners. So you can make sure that you've checked all of these things with venues as well. And one of them is the music restrictions. Check that out. Okay, let's get the budget up. Okay, so budgets. As I said, this budget has these columns, which are my kind of prices for things, but there's so much more information that should come with these. I'm actually writing at the moment a pricing guideline for you guys, so that you can really understand more about the prices that kind of are out there in the Italian wedding world and what you can get for your money. But this is here at the moment just for a guide. So I was going to plan, I think I was going to go through a budget that was for about 80 people for a wedding that is in Puglia in 2025. And imagine that we're at stage 3 where we've kind of made a budget, but now we're going to go back through with real costs, which in my brain of having this wedding. So in Puglia, you have lovely masserias and you tend to rent them for 3 nights. So in my mind, this is Masseria Potenti, which sleeps 44 people and you stay for 3 nights, and that costs €30,000. So in it goes. They don't have a wedding fee. Quite a lot of venues do, and this often covers cleaning or having extra staff on the day, because having a large number of people come and have events at your venue just means that you often need more staff involved. It's not just a kind of extra fee because it's a wedding. Sometimes it's also related to the fact that if your venue has a restaurant, they might close that restaurant whilst you have your wedding, and financially they lose out from that. So that's sometimes why you have a venue fee. Symbolic celebrant. So I've got a symbolic ceremony happening at this wedding, which means that the couple are already legally married and they're coming to have their wedding in Italy. And this can be a professional celebrant who tend to cost €400 to €600. So I'm going to go 500. But you can have a friend or family member take this role, which is obviously free. And that's a nice thing to do as well. So you can choose there. At this point for the ceremony, obviously there's loads of other scenarios. You can have a legal wedding at the venue. You can have a legal wedding at the town hall. You can have a church wedding. In those scenarios, the prices would be slightly different, and you'd also have to consider some other things like paperwork and maybe transport as well. But that's not for this budget. The whole wedding is happening here at the venue. Catering is a whole other whirlwind. So we also have a document that you can download that's called the Wedding Catering Comparison Budget. And that, much like this budget, outlines every single service a caterer offers within a wedding package, so that you can, much like this, you can plug in all the different things that you might have from the different caterers and compare them, so you get a total price at the end to compare the different caterers. But for this, I'm going to use Rotondo Catering, who are a caterer down in Puglia, who are wonderful. And for my 80 people, they're going to charge something like €170 per person. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to add 10% tax, which is how much it costs for catering. And then in this scenario, they hire an external bar from another company, which I'm just going to chuck in there. Most caterers do their own bar, and their cost will either be built into the catering, or they will charge an amount per person to have the bar, usually for 3 hours. That's that. I've also got a line on catering extras, which if you're at the early stages, I would put something in here as a contingency, because every different caterer charges slightly differently. And at this stage, you might not know what extras you might need from them. So extras might be additional hours of service, because every caterer works for 7 hours. And then if you want extra, you have to pay an hourly fee. It might be that you want a Prosecco tower. It might be that you want a midnight snack, things that you might not know right now, but that might come up later and have a significant cost. So I just put in an amount there. Usually it is around 1,000 to 2,000. Oh, I don't know where that went. In this budget, when I'm budgeting for my clients, and that almost always gets eaten up. So I definitely put something there. Music tax is an Italian thing. It's called the SIAE tax. And if you play any music at your wedding, you have to get this license to play music. If you've got a wedding planner, hopefully they would sort that out for you. Otherwise, you have to kind of go to a certain place online and get this tax. We've got an article about it on lalista.com. This price, sadly, consistently keeps going up. So by 2025, it might have gone up a little bit. It tends to go up about 10 euros every year. So not a budget breaker, but just to be accurate. Then we move on to music. So music is a challenge to forecast and to get right, I think, for your wedding in general. And at this stage, I would just I'd kind of think about if there's anything that you definitely know that you want for your wedding. So you might know for sure that you want strings when you walk down the aisle, or you might know happy with a PA system because the song I want is a recorded song. So that's really simple. So you could just work that through. And in this scenario, I'm going to kind of do a lot of things so that you can see the prices of them. So I'm going to have strings at the ceremony, which can range upwards of €1,500. There's some strings that cost £5,000. There's some that cost 1,000. So it depends massively on who and the region, the number of people in the strings. You can have a duo or a quartet. Then I'm going to have a DJ that provides sound all day for the wedding so that I know that it's completely covered, and he costs €2,000. And then I'm going to throw in, what should we throw in? A sax to come in and play with the DJ. And the sax is local and they're just coming from down the road and they cost €1,000. Some of the ones that you see, especially on Lista or online, they come at a price that's more like 3,000 to 5,000 euros, just so you can budget. But if you added sax and DJ together here, you've got three. So you're getting a bit closer to it. As I mentioned, the DJ will do the sound all day, and that's just such a good wedding hack to just have someone responsible for all the moments of sound. So even if you have strings at the ceremony, you may still want a microphone and a speaker so everyone can hear you. So the DJ would cover that, speaker at the aperitivo, speaker and mics at dinner for speeches and background music, and then the full DJ setup with their kind of full area, all the decks, lighting. That's everything that I'd want covered in that price, hopefully. Then decor. This is another challenging one. I would just say decor adds up so quickly these days, and it's obviously good to put a limit on it. It is so easy to spend 10 grand on this, and that shocks a lot of people. So I would just put that in, to be frank, and know that that is at least what you're going to spend. If you know that you have lots of ideas and you want to do lots of different things for decor, then I would put in quite a lot more. There are some videos, I know that they're in the club, but there's videos in the club about what certain wedding decor has cost. So I show some of my weddings that I've planned and what they cost in total to decorate. But if you've looked at any whisker and white weddings, just as a range to show you, it would be between 15 and 20 grand to do quite a lot of those kind of bigger weddings with lots of decor. And that's us doing it really kind of on really good value, finding really interesting ways to make the most of the decor, working with providers that are lowering cost. So it takes a lot of effort to achieve those weddings on those budgets. So if you're working with anyone else or your planner has certain suppliers that they work with, it could definitely be quite a lot more than that as well. So just bear that in mind. I've got a line for stationery. Usually I put that in with my decor budgets, but this could be the upfront stationery, like if you're going to send save the dates, if you're going to send invites out, these can obviously be very low in price. So there's amazing bespoke stationers that could do save the dates for £200. There's others that are 1,000. So you might know kind of the style and the type of stationer that you're looking to have. I would just say, what should we do for this one? This couple are going to send digital save the dates. That happens a lot now. So kind of paperless post. They're going to link to a website that is free. So that's all included. And then down the line, they might send some really nice invites out. So I'll put those in at €600. And then your dream team photographer, videographer. These obviously start at base prices, so you can have a photographer that's €2,000, €3,000, probably at the like lowest level of price, not quality. And then you can go up obviously to £20,000, euros on a photographer. The range in the middle point, I think, where I see a lot of couples spend is between 4,000 and 6,000. So let's say they're going to go, in fact, 6,000. A specific photographer that I've got in my mind that is €6,000, and a videographer that again ranges from around 3,000. You can get slightly less, but there's not many videographers at that low price point, up to an average is around 4 to 6 again thousand. So depends on your priorities, but it's going to be slightly lower priority for this couple, and they're still going to invest 4,000 in the videographer. I'm just going to have a sip of my tea if you don't mind. We've got some questions which I'm just going to look at. Okay, I'm going to answer these because we've been through these subjects. So how do you get realistic budgets at the beginning of the planning for flower and decor when vendors tend to say it depends? I know it is so hard, and often you have to book your florist before you've even got a quote from them. So I know it's kind of catch-22, but I've got a budget for you. So in here on tab 2 is a lot of things that you might have for your wedding and some indicative prices of those things, obviously with a pinch of salt. But if you think, I work with so many vendors, some are on this lower price end, some are on this higher price end. So this really does give you a good idea. It explains the things that are more fixed, like the bouquet, but it also has like flowers and foliage for the table, usually costed per meter. So you can make an assumption. I've got €180 per meter in here. So I'd base it always on that 180 and times it by your table plan, which is how many people you've got on your table, and you get a meterage for that. So I need to do something on this to give you a guide, I think. But if you've got 60 people at a wedding and you've got 2 long tables, then you've got 15 people per side, which is approximately 8 meters per table. So you can kind of work it out and put some sort of figure in, but you can see how even in this low column, it gets to 8 grand, and that's really not putting much in at all. So use that if that's helpful. How do you budget for a wedding planner? I will come on to that, I think. Please remind me. And do photographers work in a team of 2? Videographers a single person? How long does it take to get photos and videos? Okay, so everyone's different. You can get one photographer, you can get a photographer that is just one person, but they bring a second shooter. You can have photographer teams that are duos or more. You've kind of got to work out what you think is right for you. I'd start with style and price of them, and then work out what you think is going to work. One photographer is usually absolutely fine, but if you are going to like 2 different venues, if you're in a church or something, you probably want a second shooter. If you've got over 100 people at your wedding, you probably want a second shooter. So if you know from the start you want 2 people, it could be worth looking at a duo. But often to add a second shooter for any photographer can range from like 500 to €1,000. So A, budget for that, but B, find out from the start what their second shooter price might be if they're on their own. And then video is the same. I think you need 2 videographers. Just going to put it out there. I'll probably get slated by some videographers for that, but to capture, having watched videographers do their job, to capture everything and make the kind of fullest film that you can, having 2 videographers is key. And they have to work so quickly and set certain things up and to be able to capture certain moments. So yeah, I'd have 2, but again, a lot of them work on the solo brand and then they bring another videographer with them, always on the day. You can also get photographers and videographers that are teams. So there's a lot of duos out there. They tend to be husband and wife, and they're really good. So there's a couple on our website, Red on Blonde. Sam Docker's just started doing it. There's another great one called Zach and Grace, Grace and Mitch. They all work as duos, and I really like that, because you kind of know that the style is going to be the same for the entire wedding and all of the things that you're going to get. They know how to work together really well, because photographers and videographers are both kind of after the same things, the same shots, and it's really nice if they just know how to flow and work together. So sorry, I talk so much. I hope that answers your question. In terms of when you receive videos and things, that's just all in their contracts, and you'd need to work out what's right for you. Some take 3 months, some take 6 months. So you might not be willing to wait for that, for example. And content creator. So there's just a question on what would a content creator's role be, and I'll answer it while I'm here. We've just started working with content creators for our own weddings this coming summer, so it's going to be really interesting to see how that fits in with everything else that's going on a wedding day. Their job is to capture everything that's happening, much like a photographer. They actually work a bit more to a brief, so you can kind of brief them on what's important to you or certain things that you want to capture. If you've got certain videos that you want to get out at the end, so you can brief them in advance. So for example, at one of our weddings, we are having a content creator that I'm paying for us to use as Whisker and White, but also so that the couple have that footage afterwards. And they are going to literally capture, they said there'll be about 400 videos. I'm just going to mute you. There'll be about 400 videos of the day, and they're going to produce certain kind of little edits at the end, so that we know there's going to be certain things that we get out of it that we don't have to edit ourselves. I think it's quite an amazing thing to have, and I've got this theory that because their price point is about €1,500 or less, they might start to come in instead of videographers sometimes, because they're more affordable, and for couples that want some video and don't need the whole fully produced wedding video, that's a great solution. Like I didn't have a videographer, and it breaks my heart, and I still am gutted about it 10 years on. If I'd had the chance to pay €1,000 and have a content creator and just capture loads of video, I would have absolutely done it. I'd do it now. I'd pay so much to have that video that I don't have. So hopefully that's helpful. Let's get back to the budget. We're almost there. Hair and makeup. Hair and makeup is expensive, and it is often a shock for people. So a lot of couples look at Italy and look at their kind of home country for hair and makeup, but also look at the UK, because wherever you're coming from, the UK is obviously close to Italy, and it's very easy for hair and makeup artists to get out to Italy. Some of them do it for the whole summer. Also, if you're coming from other countries like Australia or America, Canada, often you have a layover in London, and it can be a chance to do a trial as well. So hair and makeup, I would budget between 600 and 800 for the bride, and then it's around 200 per person on top of that. So you need to know that from the start, because that's obviously a huge amount of money. So this bride is going to have 3 bridesmaids and her mum's hair, so I'm going to put in about €1,600 for hair and makeup. There are other options out there. Even the lowest price ones are in this kind of price bracket often, and obviously it's not something that you want to kind of mess around with. I just definitely really look at how much of a priority this is for you, and versus how much you're going to spend on it. Obviously it can be hard sometimes for other people, like your fiance, to understand the investment in this and why it costs so much, but you know, it depends how important it is to you, but it's pretty important in my eyes. And knowing how anxious people can get if this isn't right, or if they're worried about it, I would just budget for it from the start and know that you're going to be able to get what you want there. Guest transport. In this scenario, everyone's at the wedding, so we don't need it. But if you have some guests staying off site, then you need to budget that a bus that's going to pick people up, drop them off, and take them back at night, with a couple of shuttles. Each one of those buses, whether it's a 16 or a 30-seater bus, is probably going to cost you between 900 and €1,000. So you can kind of work out, if you've got 30 guests off site, you need 1 bus, and we need to put £1,000 down for the wedding day. If you've got multiple events, you might have the aspiration that you're going to do the buses for every event, and maybe put that in the budget now. but then that might be somewhere you have to move around and compromise. Also, knowing that it would cost so much for transport, when you've set your budget before you've booked your venue, you can really think about your priorities in terms of the venue. So if it's going to cost you £3,000 or more to move your guests around, is it actually better to have a venue that can sleep more people so that you don't need to spend this transport money? Have a think about that. Gosh, the more I talk, the more I realize there's just so much to think about, but you've got this. You've got this. Wedding support means wedding planner. So what was the question on wedding planner? How do you budget for one? Oh, crikey. My rule would be, what type of support do you think you want? Do you know you need all the works wedding planner that helps you from the start, find your venue, go through the whole entire process and be there on your wedding day? If so, realistically, that's probably going to start from a price of around €5,000, and it can go up to, well, it can go up to anything. Probably just be realistic. And this is where you might put in 5,000, but you go off and you get some quotes and you come back and you realize that the planner you want is a little bit more maybe. And then you have to reassess whether that's the right planner or whether you can find something for your budget. I'm not going to go into why a wedding planner is worth the money. You don't need to hear that. But you might decide that you don't need a full planner, you need a partial planner, or you need a day coordinator, or that's what you can afford. And those prices tend to be lower at more like the €2,000 mark. There are going to be planners that do full planning for a lot lower in price. And just thinking about how to say it politically, they are probably fantastic at their job to start with, but like anyone that you're thinking about having for your wedding, even if a planner is 10 grand, you should do the same thing, which is to just make sure you really understand the service that you're going to get, that it matches what you want from a planner, and that you've got reviews and you know that their service lives up to it. Because for me as a planner, €2,000 is a very low amount of money to get paid for the sort of hundreds and hundreds of hours that you put into a wedding. So I would always wonder how that planner kind of does it and how that all gets managed. I would also just make sure you always ask a question about commission and you understand if someone is getting money through the vendors that you're booking. So commission is when you might book a venue and the planner gets 10% from that venue because they took you there to that venue. I think that that's perfectly fine to do as long as you know about that from the start, and that it doesn't mean it's an additional cost to you. So if the venue was 20,000, but because you went through your planner, it was 23,000 to you, that planner's getting the £3,000. So they don't cost you £2,000, they've already now cost you £5,000, etc., etc. Lots more to say on that. In this budget is £5,000. Planner expenses, this is if it was abroad, so Sicily, or they had to travel down to Puglia, for example, like my team. So I might put in some hotel stays for the team. And then there's a few other things here that are dependent on who you book. So if you bring a band over from another country, you might have to hire local equipment for them to perform. So that's what that row is. Or you might have other expenses. So sometimes you have to pay for the travel. So if the hair and makeup artist came from England, you have to pay for their flights, or you have to pay for their transfers. Sometimes they include all of that in their quote, which is much easier. So you don't have to have it as an extra budget line and you don't have to manage it at all. And then wet weather contingency. This again is why we set a budget before we choose our venue. So if we know upfront that we can't afford a tent, or that we don't like tents, we don't want a tent, then we need to know that the venue has space inside for the 80 guests that we're bringing to have at least 2 parts of the day. So the dinner is the most important part to protect, but you also want to protect one other part. So the ceremony, which can then be turned around into the party area later. So you make sure you've got that. This venue has that. So in my scenario, I don't have a wet weather contingency. If you do need a tent, there are loads of great tent companies out there, and we're trying to get more of them on La Lista, so that you've got lots of options, but they are actually quite well priced, I think, when you compare them to weddings at home. So the deposit for a tent can be between €700 and upwards to like €5,000, depending on what type of tent you have. But for the average tent of a really decent size that would fit 100 people, you could put in around 800 to 1,500 euro here. So that's what I'd put in. And then you just have your other events. So if you are having other events around your wedding, so a welcome event, a recovery event, you need to think about whether you're going to cater this, whether you are going to just have drinks, what you're going to do. Often this is an area that at the moment I'm seeing couples need to kind of scale back a bit because prices have gone up and it's hard to achieve all of the things that they want to do. But because we're in the aspirational stage, let's pop in. We've got 80 guests and I know that this venue charges 45 euros for their welcome. And I'll just put that for the day after as well. I'm not going to have any entertainment and I'm not going to have any decor because it's not a priority and I can't really afford it in my budget. I also have to pay music tax for these events as well. And if my guests were off site, I'd have that other transport cost too, but I don't have it in this budget. We're getting there. And the spoiler is we can see the amount at the bottom. It's adding up. Then I've just got these other expenses, which are just things that as a planner, we don't usually get that involved in, but you should be thinking about as part of your overall wedding budget. There's no girl maths allowed here. We can't just put the dress in another budget pot. It has to all be here. So if you're self-catering your wedding or your venue, you might have food and drinks delivered when you check in so that you've got some stuff in the kitchen for people. This place is serviced, so we're not going to have that here. Breakfasts and other food is also included in the price of this place, but there's other venues where you can pay for breakfast or you can have a caterer come in and do breakfast, and that tends to be about 12 or 15 euro per person. If you're looking for something more economical, then just having stuff in the shared kitchen for people like drinks and other breakfasty snacks is a good way to go, and you can have that kind of service delivered for you if you don't want to go and do it yourself. I did it myself and I wasted a lot of time and it really annoyed me. So I don't recommend doing that, but it's totally up to you if you're looking to save money. Wedding insurance is something we've been talking about as a team today, actually, because I don't know what's happening to the screen. Wedding insurers really were not very nice during COVID, and quite a lot of them went bust for obvious reasons. But there are 2 or 3 companies out there that do provide wedding insurance, and I don't know if they will go ahead and pay out if anything happens, but on reflection, it's definitely worth spending a little bit of money, like 150 quid, to know that you are covered if something happened to your venue or something happened to one of your suppliers, like they missed their flight and you urgently had to get another photographer. If you do that with a day's notice, then it's probably going to cost you quite a lot of money. Or if the photographer had to book other flights and for some reason they passed that amount on to you, these things would be covered by insurance. Now, we so rarely see them happen, but we have just seen, and I don't want to scare you, this never happens, but we've just seen a venue that's gone bankrupt, and if the couple have insurance, then everything is okay. So £150, very well spent. I would put that in everyone's budget if you can. I don't know if it's possible to get wedding insurance if you're from America. It wasn't in the past, so it might still not be possible. There are other things you can do, like have really good contracts. You can have pay through credit cards for everything that you get for your wedding, but nothing is quite as robust as the insurance. Then you've got clothing, rings, travel to your wedding, gifts for people, welcome packs for guests, which always come in last minute as a little extra, but add up cost-wise. So if that's something that you know that you need, put that in now. And then contingency or buffer, as I would call it. And I always have a buffer. It's just at least 5,000 euro, and sometimes it's more. And every couple spend that on something, not because they intend to, because it's there, because something comes up. So always have a buffer. And then I've also got your visit expenses in here. So like traveling to your trips to do your tastings, your hair and makeup trial, all of those things can cost as well. So it's worth putting them in. So flights, travel, accommodation, hair and makeup trial might be £100. Tasting can be a couple of £100. You often get that back, but it adds up. That's like 1,000, isn't it? And this is where we get to 94,000 euro, which is obviously a lot of money. And I think a shock to most people when you get to this point. So I did almost this exact budget with my couple who are getting married here, and their budget was €80,000, that they max budget 85. So we had to find 10 grand back. What we haven't done yet is put in guest contribution. So for me, that means I know 44 people can stay at their venue, so I can claw that back somehow by saying 35 people are going to stay for 3 nights and pay €150 per person per night, and then I get 15,000 back, which brings my budget down to £70,000, and that is where we are. Thank you for listening to that. If we've got to this point and you're over budget, then obviously you would go back through and rework and have a rethink. So what can you do differently? What's not a priority? So Saks is really nice to have, but it's just probably not going to fit in the budget. If we come back to it later and we can add it back in, fabulous. Or catering, okay, we know we've got this budget of €170 per person. We're going to just try so hard to find a caterer that will do the bar and all of the food included for that 170, so that we can take that bar cost out. There must be one out there. I know that there is, but there's one. So then you've got less options and everything becomes a little bit more limited. So only you know whether you're going to be happy planning in that scenario where things are a little bit more restricted and you've got less options. If you know food is your top priority, then you definitely shouldn't be playing around with that line of the budget yet. Things like that. So just working it through to get to the point that you can, changing the wedding support that you've got, which is risky, but being realistic about that, taking out one of your events or doing it differently. So when my couples can't afford it, kind of doing the full catering and the full bar, we book a restaurant or a bar in a local town and everyone just come and meets them informally to do that. So there's ways around all of these things, but ultimately having support is the right way to go, because there's all these planners out there that just have so much knowledge that are going to be able to work this budget around with you and find these types of solutions and then find the right vendors that fit into your budget. So I would always support having that for you. I'm just going to finish up now. Have you got any more questions? I think there's a few. Do couples pay for guest transport for the venue, like when they arrive in Italy? Some couples do, but I'd say they're couples that have a big budget and that can easily fit that into their budget. I think it depends on your guests and how easily they travel, what their expectations might be of your wedding, but I'd say 95% the guests make their own way to the venue. Your job is to give them really good information. So as long as your wedding website has been super clear on how they do it, it's given them great transfer companies, great reliable taxi companies. Maybe you and your planner have tried to get really good rates for them so that it's easy for them, or lower price for them. Also car hire, giving them advice on how to get the best rates for car hire, which car hire companies to use, or trains. Trains are so good in Italy, all of that. So just making sure they've got the comms very clear from you. That's that. Do photographers tend to do a trial shoot? Some throw it in, some really want to meet you and have an engagement shoot, but it's not that common, I'd say, and for some of them it has an extra fee. It is a really good thing to do. I think we had some team photos taken the other day and I've forgotten what it's like to have pictures taken, and it is uncomfortable. I don't know many people that would be comfortable with it. So to just have a little practice is a great idea. Sometimes your photographer, they might not do an engagement shoot, but they might come to Italy the day before your wedding and say to you, at your welcome event, let's just wander off for half an hour and have some pictures. That might be included. And then you've just had a tiny little practice to ease you in, but you also get some really nice Italy shots in a local town or at your venue or something. Do I have benchmarks for what low and high would look like to give an indication? I suppose you mean like a low venue and a high venue and a low hair and makeup. And not at the moment, but I am working on a price guide, which will be coming with examples of the types of vendors. Literally, links to the types of vendors that come into those different price points. So hopefully in a few weeks that will be on the website. What would you say is the average budget for 120 guests? I know this will vary hugely. Yeah, it does massively. But I mean, I would personally struggle, and every planner will be different, but I would struggle to do a big wedding like that without 100 grand. And that would be quite hard to achieve. I'd have to stretch it and compromise in some places and negotiate a lot with suppliers. So to be comfortable, need a little bit more than that. I was just going to put it into the budget and see what happens. Even if that budget we just made and you put in 120 people at those same prices and you put in some transport, it's going to add up. Yeah, at least 100 grand. Does the cost of a wedding planner alter if you have a micro wedding? It probably does. So every wedding planner will charge differently, and I certainly would. So if I know that I've got a smaller guest list, it does change the planning quite a lot, but the fundamentals are still the same. You still have to find the same amount of vendors, you still have to do the same kind of process in terms of planning. So there'd probably be a base cost, and then the different planner would charge kind of slightly differently for micro weddings, I think. But you definitely could get a good price from someone on that if you're looking for that. And then Joanna, our guest list is around 200 people with kids, and it will be just a one-day event. Would it be more sense to find a local planner since there is less events? Do you mean instead of kind of bringing someone in, if it's in Sicily and your planner's based in Tuscany, you'd prefer to have a Sicilian wedding planner? It logistically makes sense, but I think it comes down to more how you get on with that planner. So I'd interview various ones that you feel like you might connect with, and then go from there. And whether you've identified that as a perk and a benefit to their wedding planning service, that they're local. They might also be lower in cost because they don't have expenses to travel there. Only you'll be able to kind of work that out as you go through and interview planners. Okay, got to the end of the questions. Thank you so much. Please add more if you have a few more. I think that is around about it. So obviously in my membership, the club, I talk about all of these things all the time. I try to give you so much information that kind of the information that I've got in my brain at the moment, but we have tutorials on every single aspect of planning, and we're adding new ones all of the time. And in there, I try not to just teach you, but ask you questions and try and get you to kind of figure out what's right for you and your wedding, because every single wedding is so different. You've all got such different priorities and ideas. So we try and do that. And in our private community, in our group, I'm in there every single day answering questions for couples just like this. So just trying to help people along their wedding planning like stepping stones. I'm not the full planner, but when you've got questions, when you've got problems, when you've got decisions to make, I'm there, but also so are the other couples to help make those decisions with you and support you and give you the information that you need. And as I say, I'm going to be launching the price guide soon, which should help you in terms of budgeting and connecting you to suppliers that are realistic for your budget. And I'm going to be launching a wedding planner workbook, which will help you work through every stage of wedding planning, so that you can be guided through with as much information as possible. I'm hoping it's going to be quite fun as a little tool to kind of get you through planning as well. So we will be emailing out this session if you want to watch it again, but it will also have a little bit more information and a code for the club if you did want to come and join me in there. I'm just going to see if there's any other questions. Oh, you're all just saying thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. It is amazing to know that we've got this lovely big community now. And I really hope that you get a budget that works for you. Please reach out to us if you've got any feedback or any questions that come up. We would love to hear from you. And hopefully you have a really good rest of your day. Thank you. Ciao.